In this episode of my deep dive into the screenplay for Joker, I'll be focusing on everything from the inciting incident all the way through the Act 1 turn. If you want to see my breakdown on the status quo section of Joker, the link is in the description below. Page 14 of the script, which is about minute 15 into the movie, is the perfect place to put your inciting incident. That gives you a decent chunk of time to establish your story engine without rushing through anything, and it's early enough in the story to keep things moving at a good clip. Here's how the dominoes are supposed to fall. The inciting incident is the first major domino. It introduces a problem into the protagonist's life, but it does not force them to try and solve it. Instead, it slowly backs them into a corner until they're forced to make a choice. So how does Joker stack up? Poorly. Let's start with the inciting incident. The beat sheet would imply that Randall giving Arthur the gun on page 14 is the inciting incident. But is it? Does this disrupt the status quo? Does it present a problem that needs to be solved? Does it challenge Arthur's worldview or push him towards the Act 1 turn? To know the answer, you have to know where you're headed. You have to dial into what the Act 1 turn is. So to make things easier, I'll go ahead and I'll just say flat out that the subway killings is the Act 1 turn in Joker. And as I'll explain a little later on, it doesn't do the job that the Act 1 turn is supposed to do, but it's clear that this is what the writers thought was the big event, the big moment that moved us from Act 1 into Act 2. How does Randall giving Arthur the gun start the cause and effect momentum that will inevitably lead to the subway killings? And don't tell me that, he gave him the gun that he ends up using and he says he's got to defend himself, or that this turns Arthur's internal battle into some sort of external battle. That's all nonsense. The truth is, getting Arthur the gun was nothing more than a narrative requirement. Arthur needs the gun in order to be able to kill those pricks on the subway. That's it. Now, I haven't checked the credits of the movie to see what Randall's last name is, but it might as well be Chekhov, because this is just Chekhov's gun. You introduce it, you got to use it later on. What if, after being beaten up, Arthur's social worker dismisses his pain, and he's openly mocked by the mother on the bus? And then he fights with his mother, with Penny, because he thinks that she's blind to how horrible the world is. Then maybe Arthur approaches Randall for the gun. Now we have movement. Now we have a chain of events that build on each other. And now we have a man who feels powerless and unseen, and who feels like he's tired of the world walking all over him. And now he has a gun. One more side note about Randall, because this really bothers me. Randall is an egregious example of creating a character just to be used as a tool instead of as an opposing worldview. Randall has no consistency or purpose other than to give the plot what it needs when it needs it. Arthur needs a gun, Randall gives him a gun. Arthur needs to be betrayed, Randall betrays him. Arthur needs to do something brutal and horrifying before he shows up on Murray. Randall shows up as his friend to see how he's doing because his mom's in the hospital. All of a sudden, Randall's his friend again, and he's just there so that Joker can kill him. So what happens now? Presumably, we're in the chaos section of the film, which is the part of the movie that bridges the inciting incident and the Act 1 turn. So let's see what happens. Arthur's yelled at by his boss and says he'll have to pay for the sign that got busted. Then Joker stomps on some garbage bags, and he makes his sad commute home. And then on page 18, he holds the elevator door open for Sophie. And she immediately challenges Arthur's worldview by saying, "Oh, this building's just so awful, isn't it?" Oh, no, wait, that doesn't challenge anything. That just reinforces what Arthur already believes. And remember, we won't know that their future relationship is a figment of Arthur's imagination until much later in the story. So her character has got to work and function like a real person now. So what's the point of introducing Sophie as an object of desire? Is this some sort of deep cut reference to John Hinckley Jr.'s imaginary girlfriend, Lynn Collins, which would be another connection to Taxi Driver? Why does Arthur latch on to her now? Did she just move in? In the April 2018 draft, it's clear that Sophie knows Arthur and knows his mother, but that was all taken out of the final cut. Up until this scene, you'd expect Arthur to have avoided eye contact with Sophie, or maybe just focus on her daughter like he did when he focused on the little boy on the bus. But again, we're really not dealing with consistency here. We're just watching things happen to Arthur. and the dude's got a gun in his pocket. So, I mean, maybe fingering that deadly metal penis in his pocket makes him feel more confident. Maybe that's why he engages and says hello. Maybe Sophie has something more interesting to say. Or maybe I should just go rewatch Taxi Driver. I'll talk more about the Tyler Durden connection when we finally get to the big reveal. So for right now, let's just get back on topic. Meeting Sophie is a much better inciting incident than getting the gun, if it was set up better. If she represents something good and pure in this shithole of a city, and Arthur is presented with a way to protect or save her, or at the very least, to get her to see him, then that would satisfy the story engine and the main job of the inciting incident. Back to Joker. Arthur holds the elevator, has his worldview reinforced. He pretends to shoot himself in the head, and then he gives his mother a bath. Nothing new here, just more Thomas Wayne setup, and a slight insult from Penny where she says, "Don't you have to be funny to be a comedian?" I actually like this line. It's so damaging in such an innocent way. Nice job with that, writers of Joker. So then what happens? He dances around with the gun in the living room, and it's a setup for the bathroom dance later on, and he accidentally shoots the gun. So what are we supposed to learn about Arthur? That he loves his rib cage, I guess. We get a small bit about how Arthur's suicidal, even though it's not connected with the cruelty of the world. It's just a one-off kind of line about how Randall shouldn't have given him a loaded gun. And then what does he do? He stalks Sophie, because why not? Why wouldn't he? Does she do anything interesting while he's stalking her? Anything that reinforces the movie's themes or pushes us towards the subway murders? No. So after creeping on Sophie and finding out where she works, Arthur hits up the comedy club for the first time. This is on page 23, okay? We're 23 pages in, and even though we've had a line here and there about how committed Arthur is to comedy, this is actually the first time that we see him pursuing anything or even going to the comedy club. And here's where we get a huge missed opportunity. The open mic flyer that he takes from the club. If you watch my last video on the status quo section of Joker, then you already know what I think of this. Had this been set up by Murray on his show and framed as an open mic competition where the winner gets to perform on Murray and be interviewed by him, then this would have made a lot of sense. But as it is, it's just a necessary plot point to get Arthur on stage so that he could be humiliated by Murray later on. Anyway, back to Mom's, where Sophie shows up and totally calls him out for being a creeper and following her around. Obviously, I'm just kidding. She's not weirded out by this at all. In fact, she said that she wished he had come in and robbed the place. Oh, and then she says how funny he is. I don't understand this part at all. I don't understand why the writers decided to hand Sophie over to Arthur without him even earning her affection at all. I don't understand what purpose she serves other than to reinforce his fantasy life of her as his girl and Murray as his father. I don't understand why the sequence is here when we have real ground to cover before we get to the subway killings within the next few pages. I'm just honestly baffled. So let's keep going. On page 25 of the script is where Arthur stretches his face into the smile. This is what was moved into the opening image of the film. And from there, we're at the children's hospital where he drops his gun and ends up getting fired on page 27. Okay. So this actually feels like an inciting incident. I mean, at least it feels a lot more like an inciting incident than Randall giving him the gun. But what are the stakes here? What does getting fired represent to Arthur? We know that he's having money problems, but that's really kind of what I would call the side pickle of the story. Gotham's lack of humanity is the sandwich, right? But his money problem is really just kind of like the side pickle that comes with this sandwich. It's not really what we're too concerned about here. You get it? I hope you get it. Okay, great. The problem with this being the inciting incident is that there's no breathing room between this event and the Act 1 turn, which is the subway killings. There's really nothing for Arthur to debate or question or consider. He's fired, he's on the subway, he kills some assholes. So let's pause here to see if there's something in the April 2018 version that adds anything to this sequence of events. In that version, we get a scene of Arthur interacting with Sophie at the bank that she works at. Unfortunately, nothing interesting happens. So it's not a huge loss that it was cut from the film. My guess is that the writers thought that this would be kind of confusing once we found out that their relationship was a fantasy, so they just cut it. Honestly, that's fine. It doesn't really do anything other than to push the subway scene to page 31. Here we have arrived at the Act 1 turn. Just like with all the other beats in this film, the subway killings is just an event. It's just a thing that happens. Now, Arthur does choose to kill the third guy in cold blood. He chases him down and shoots him. This is an active choice because he could have just run away. That's a good moment. But where does it lead? The bathroom. Now, I really do like this scene. I like the scene where he starts dancing in the bathroom. It actually feels cathartic. When I first read it and when I first heard about it, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be so forced and insufferable and awful. And yet it worked. I mean, it really worked for me, I think largely in part of Joaquin Phoenix's performance. Unfortunately, it didn't advance the story in any meaningful way whatsoever. In a better structured script, Arthur would have taken this newfound confidence, born out of the blood of strangers, and doubled down on it. Not by punching the time clock when he leaves his job or by rushing into Sophie's apartment and kissing her, but by seeking out more violence. This is something that American Psycho gets right, that Fight Club gets right, that Taxi Driver gets right. And now take a step back here to hypothesize how the subway killings could have worked. What if these shitheads had been introduced earlier and Arthur chose not to interact with them? What if this time felt different because of the growing relationship he has with Sophie, or because after he was fired, he went to the comedy club for comfort, but these assholes were heckling the guy on stage? Because you see where I'm going here, right? Joker is so frustrating because it had all of the ingredients to make a compelling film. Unfortunately, the writers decided to use salt instead of sugar. Okay, so that just about does it for Act 1 of Joker. In part 3 of this series, we're going to go from the subway killings all the way up to the midpoint of the movie. If you have anything to add to this conversation, put it in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, come back to the channel for more breakdowns and videos on screenplay architecture and formatting. Until next page, I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.